If you're the kind of person that struggles with being angry all the time, you feel like you're not who you used to be, you want to get back to being that person, but you don't really know where to start, I want to tell you a story. When I first became a parent, it wasn't in the way a lot of people do. I became a step parent first and a biological parent second. And when I first started that experience as being a step parent, to start with, it was amazing. I had these two wonderful boys in front of me, and they were full of life. They were 3 and 18 months old. And it was one of the most wonderful experiences I'd ever known. I felt like I'd achieved peak, like for me in my life. Nothing was going to get better than this. Eventually, I found a really stable, full-time job in an industry that I knew, that I liked what I did. And at that point, I honestly thought I had everything figured out. What unfolded over the next 12 months or so proved all of that to be wrong. Not just a little bit wrong, massively out. It started at work. The work became more frustrating. The people I was working under became more difficult to deal with. And eventually, the pressure and the frustration from work started to follow me home. So before, I was getting home from work, even if it hadn't been a great day, I was still able to turn up as the person I wanted to be and wanted to present to my stepsons, to my partner at the time. And I could almost pretend in that evening that things were still okay. When it started to follow me home, I didn't have access to that person anymore, the person I was trying to be, the person I wanted to be. And it didn't change massively overnight. Like, the kids asked me to play a game with them, and I would say I'd do it in a bit. Not because I was busy, but because I just didn't want to. I didn't have it about me to want to play. And then eventually they would go on and on and on, and then I'd snap at them for asking me to play with them. And the only reason they were asking me so often was because I kept saying no. And the only reason I said no was because I didn't want to do it. So I was snapping at them because I didn't want to do what they wanted me to do, which they had every right to expect of me as their parent figure. This started to get progressively worse because the more work would stress me out, the more it would follow me home. The more it followed me home, the more it had an impact on me while I was at home. And eventually, the two places I spent pretty much all of my time were work and home, and both of those became stressful environments. I would hate going to work in the morning. Right, I'd wake up in the morning on a day where I have work, and I'd be like just so in my head and so tense and already frustrated almost in advance before anything had happened, because I knew I had to go to work that day. I knew it was going to be difficult. But what I wasn't doing then was giving myself a fair chance while I was at home. And I would snap at my kids in the morning before I left if they were playing up with my partner. I wouldn't be half as patient with them. And again, they weren't that old. By this point, they're like, I think they were 3 and 4 years old, right? And I wasn't half as patient with them as I should have been. If they weren't listening, if they weren't like taking their plate out of the kitchen or picking up their toys and they would ask, it'd be like, and I can remember sitting there going, do as you've been told, do it now. Because I wasn't able to access the person that I wanted to be. This person I was becoming was nothing like who I wanted to be, nothing like how I wanted to be. The person I was becoming was this unpleasant, angry person that didn't feel like me anymore. Eventually, this all came to a head one day. Me and my partner had quite a massive argument, and I actually walked out. I didn't leave properly, but I was outside and I got as far as the car. Her dad, who was down staying with us at the time, actually came out to the car, I half expected him to try and hit me. And I was honestly ready for that. That was what I was expecting to happen. But he stopped me. And he's like, look, this isn't you. I've known you now for, what's it been, 18 months, 2 years, something like that. And I know this isn't you. But I also know it can't go on like this in the home. Like, this can't be how it happens. Now, luckily, my partner's dad, he didn't live with us full time, but he was one of these people that he had enough life experiences to be able to say the right thing at the right time. And it came to it that he sat me and my partner down once the kids had gone to bed, and we had a proper chat about stuff. And I was like, I don't want to keep being like this. I remember saying this in the room. I don't want to keep being like this. When I'm reacting, it's happening faster than I can stop it. Like, before I've even thought of what I'm going to say, it's already coming out of me. And when that happens, it's a hard thing to deal with, because how do you stop something that you weren't even prepared to do? Like, how do you stop a knee-jerk reaction? Because that's what it was. It was happening so quickly that I physically couldn't stop it in time. And I thought for a long time in all of that, this wasn't who I was. This wasn't who I wanted to be. I missed being the person who I was when I met my partner, when I met the kids. I wanted that person back. And I had no idea how to get there. And I thought for the longest time that something was wrong with me, that I should be being better than this. And actually, what it came down to, what I realized later, was that I hadn't changed. The environment had changed. That doesn't excuse any of what happened, and I'll explain what I mean. But if you think about it this way, if you're used to a certain life, a certain lifestyle, right? Let's say that you're, early 20s, you've got a partner, you rent a flat, you work full time, she works full time, you have the evenings to yourself, the weekends to yourself, you go off on holidays when, there's a bank holiday weekend, and you have a social life, and you have all of these different things going on, but none of it's really that stressful. And even if it is, it doesn't matter if it follows you around, because you don't have much in the way of things weighing you down all the time. That was how it was for me before I met my partner, before I met my kids. Not carefree and easygoing, but a lot less responsibility at that season of my life. So if you flash forward, come forward 3 or 4 years to where I was then, 2 kids, a job that I'd completely ended up hating, there was nowhere where I could just go and exist in an environment that the old version of me lived in nearly all the time. Because the environment wasn't there anymore, the person I was in those environments wasn't there anymore. And it made it really hard, because once you lose access to the person you were, you lose access to the environment where you can be that person again. How do you move on from that? What I found was that you don't move on from it. You never forget the person you were. You'll always, to some extent, miss being that person, miss being able to access that version of yourself that you want to be. But what I found, the more of this went on and the more kind of worldly wise and aware that I got, I was expecting a version of myself from an environment that doesn't exist anymore to turn up and present in an environment that was completely different and far more demanding. When I realized that, when I started becoming more aware of what was actually happening and what was causing these problems, what I noticed was there was so much more pressure on me than there had ever been. You're not just talking like, oh, there was the pressure of keeping the job, there was the pressure of being a good parent. Forget all of that. I was living under more pressure than I'd ever known in my life. And I just wasn't seeing it for what it was. Because there were two big kinds of pressure that were going on. The way I break this down is like thinking of an iceberg, right? If you think of an iceberg, the top half of the iceberg, the bit above the water, right? That's the external pressure. That's the parts that people see. So that's where people know, like, you've got kids, you've got a car that just breaks down every couple of weeks, you've got a job that you don't like, you've got bills to pay, you've got, other responsibilities, family drama, social standards to maintain. Like, another thing with the external pressure, and that, I don't know if you'll relate to this or not, but for me growing up, I wasn't just taught to stay calm. You were taught, for where I grew up, you were taught to try and be the best of yourself. Not exactly in those words, but it was like, treat others how you want to be treated, do for others what you want done for you. There's always this kind of pressure to not just turn up and do okay, but turn up to whatever environment it was and put your best foot forward all the time. Make the best impression wherever you went. Now that's not the same as just staying calm. Staying calm is like a pass grade at that point. The pressure, the person you're trying to be, comes from that wanting to put your best foot forward, wanting to be your best version of yourself all the time. And the harder I tried to maintain that, the further away from it I was getting, to the point where I wasn't even hitting the pass grade of just staying calm. I was falling away from that as well. Because we talked about the top half, the external pressure, the top half of the iceberg. Underneath the water, the larger half of the iceberg, the bit people can't normally see, was the guilt. All the times I'd lose my temper with the kids, with my partner, all the things I would get wrong at work that cost people time or effort, or in some cases money that they just didn't have. The frustration that I was feeling with myself, that other people were feeling with me, that all added up. And then there was the way it was affecting me, how I really felt, like carrying all of that everywhere. Trying to not just live through that pressure, but to hide it from literally everybody else. The isolation that comes from that kind of pressure is something that nobody in your life will really ever understand. And it took me years of living with that, both before and after becoming a parent, to really understand exactly what that pressure was costing me. Eventually, I tried different tactics, different methods for trying to reclaim the person you were, or to stay calm all the time, or to never crack under pressure. The courses you see where it's like mindfulness tips and hacks to stay calm and these things, I consumed so much of that content in that season of my life, and all of it would fall into one of three buckets. Bucket one, I just couldn't do it. There were certain parts of it that felt like it wasn't me, it was cringy, it was just there. I didn't want to do, like, the meditation, the yoga, right? I'm not really a meditation yoga person. I may spend half an hour in the car on the way to work listening to heavy, screamy metal, and spend half an hour singing heavy, screamy metal songs to relieve my frustrations instead. I don't do the meditation side of things, right? I do the, rock out to Linkin Park and Bring Me the Horizon and Green Day as my way to kind of restore my own peace. Bucket two was that I didn't have the time or the space to do it. Journaling is a fantastic example that goes into this second bucket, because journaling it is not just a task, because that's exactly what it is. It's a task. But in order to access the relief that comes from journaling, you've A, got to get into the habit of doing it. B, you've got to be able to write well enough that you can get out what you want to say. And C, if you're a parent, as I was when I was trying to do all of this stuff, not only have you then got to find the time to do it. I'm not saying just parents struggle for time, but for me, this was the season of life I was trying to do it. So not only have you got to find the time or make the time to do the journaling, if you're a parent, you're journaling at home, chances are you'll get yourself like a little A5 pad and a packet of pens, and you'll get to, say, Friday evening, having bought them on a Monday, get to Friday evening and think, I'm going to smash some journaling. Go to the paper, go to the pens, and find that every single page of your journal has got massive scribbles all over it, and all of the pens are missing because your kids have got into it. Then not only are you not doing the journaling that you planned to do, but also you've just lost, £6 to £8 of investment in the pad and the pens because your kids have got into it all. The final way these things didn't serve me well enough, or that I couldn't access the version I wanted to be through these methods, was that I would always hit a ceiling. Even if on those rare occasions where it wasn't too much time, I actually resonated with it, it was doing good, I would always hit a ceiling with it, because either it stopped working after time, it wasn't having the same effect a month in, 2 months in, I would just give up doing it because it got too much like hard work, or a combination of those things. Like I could probably point to stories like this, but I'll save that for another video. But eventually, having tried all of this and none of it working, what I realized was that I needed something that worked for me in the life I live right now. There's a framework I teach called the 1% method, and it never used to be called that. In fact, it never used to be called anything. This started one weekend when I had just fucking had enough. I was fed up with work. I was fed up with my kids. I was fed up with everybody telling me to just calm down. Why are you so angry all the time? This is not how you're supposed to be. I remember thinking, like, I fucking know this. I don't need telling to suck eggs. I know this isn't good enough. It all came to a head one day, and I went out and sat in the car outside my house. I wasn't leaving. I said to my partner, I was like, I need some time out. I went off and sat in the car, and I put on a few songs, and in that moment, nobody needed me in that time. I wasn't required as a parent or as a colleague or a partner or a carer or anything. In that small gap of time, nobody needed me to be anything. In that small gap of time, I could just be me. Problem is, at that point, having spent 2 or 3, it might have been 4 years now, constantly being something to somebody, I didn't really know what being me was anymore. But what I knew was that spending that 5 minutes, 10 minutes, whatever it was, in the car felt a hell of a lot better than it would have been had I not done that and tried to push through and ultimately fallen short again. So what I started doing was trying to work out, like, where are the times in my day where I could have that time again? And eventually I coined the idea they were moments. Moments in a day that's already built exactly as it is for you. So, like, for me, right, with the kids, with work, with family life, social life, whatever it was, around all of that, fitting in amongst all of that, where were these moments I could take where I wasn't having to be anything to anybody. I wasn't having to perform a certain part of myself because nobody needed me in that time. I started small. I started with time that I knew was unguarded, that was my time. And what that looked like to start with was to drive to and from work, because there was only ever me in the car, which made life a hell of a lot easier. I know not everybody has access to that kind of time, but that's how I started off, was just that time in the car to and from work when it was just me. If I went like out to the shops or whatever, when I was on my own, because when I had that time on my own, I could put on some music, like I say, have my own kind of like angry music therapy session on the way to work, on the way home from work. And while that wasn't what you'd find in most self-help guides, it did me the power of good, because it was what I already liked doing that gave me a benefit, and it fitted into my day. I'm pretty sure if you wanted the perfect moment, like to reset and just to come back to yourself a little bit, you would want time probably by yourself, doing something you probably enjoyed in a way that probably wasn't going to affect the lives of people around you. That was exactly what I had. What I now call it is a 1% reset, or a shared reset. The shared resets are more for people who don't have that individual time, right? And we'll start with those, because I fundamentally believe that if you try and access either the shared reset or the 1% reset, and you commit to them for long enough, there will be a benefit for you in it, and you will feel more like the person you were, even if it's not that person anymore, even if it's not that version of you. It's closer to that version of you than the person you felt you've become as the pressure has increased over the years. So a shared reset is very simple. It's doing something, a responsibility, a task, whatever it might be, that you already have to do, and it's bringing something into that responsibility that you like. So to give you like the easiest example of this, right? If you were like a stay-at-home full-time parent, and you could, like, you have two kids who don't go to school yet, as my kids did when I first met them. They weren't at school, and they'd be at home all the time. So when you go out to do the dishes, right, take your phone with you, put some music on in the background, something you like, an artist you love. Could be, you know, 5 minutes. But here's the thing, when it's a reset like that, yes, I know you're still doing the dishes, and I know that people out there hate doing them, but you can get lost in your own little world doing that a little bit. If your kids are sat watching the TV, or they're having some lunch or whatever it might be, and you're out doing the dishes and you've got on some of your favorite music, or maybe an audiobook, you can escape into the environment you've created for you in that moment. So even though you're still sharing that reset with a responsibility, the environment where the responsibility lives is now controlled by you. So it's a reset environment that just happens to be running alongside a responsibility you were already going to do anyway. Except this time, instead of, we use the dishes again, right? Instead of doing the dishes and thinking ahead to like the other house that you got to do, or your kids have got like maybe a doctor's appointment later in the day, or you're stressing about something else, whatever it might be, instead of being in your own head and the responsibility running the environment, not just what you're doing, but everything else that consumes your day, everything else you have to think about as well. Instead of that running that show, you're deciding what the environment's like. Even if it's for 5 minutes, enough of those moments, those shared resets, taken over time build up what I call emotional space. Emotional space, in my opinion, is what people get when they take enough of these resets. What emotional space is that gap. We said at the start of the video about a reaction would happen before you could stop it. Emotional space, in my definition, is having enough breathing room mentally, emotionally, to recognize when something is getting on your nerves and to see it from far enough away, like at arm's reach, to think, I don't want to react badly to that. What can I do before that happens? It gives you that breathing space, that thinking time to try a different way, to think of a different plan before it gets to that point. The 1% resets are similar to a shared reset, except this is your time. Like we said about the driving. That driving, the angry music therapy that I was talking about, that's a 1% reset. It's time in your day that already exists for you that you're not claiming, that again, more often than not, the pressure of responsibility is the environment. All you're doing is just changing the environment. So if it's driving to or from work, if it's walking down to pick your kids up from school, if it's going down to the shops, or even if you're out doing the shopping, right? If you're there by yourself and you're unencumbered, put some headphones in. I encourage you, take that time back, because the shared resets are helpful. And enough shared resets taken over time don't just give you access to emotional space, but they give you the opportunity to become aware of the time that isn't claimed, that can become the 1% reset. I encourage you to try both of these things where you can, right? Because a few years ago, I was the person who needed this help. Because of these two things, because of these two methods that I've not had to change and adapt, they've changed and adapted to my life as it is. I haven't had to make an hour in the evening to do some of this. I haven't had to learn a new skill. There are things in the world I already enjoyed, and I simply brought those into the environments. It just changed the ambient noise. It changed the pressure in that space long enough for me to be able to breathe without feeling like I was being squeezed, without feeling like my chest was so tight I couldn't take a full breath. Enough of that over time helped me to get to where I am now. So not only do I have a way that helps me, but I'm using my story and my experiences and my struggles and overcoming that to try and help other people instead. If this video has helped you in any way, I genuinely want you to know that that was the purpose of this video, was to help you in some way, whether you just recognize yourself in the story, whether you're going to try either of the resets, whatever it is. If you go away feeling even a little bit better than you did when you started, this video has done its job. Until the next video though, my name has been Daniel Mottram, and I can't wait to catch up with you in the next video.